This is day 10 being in front of a camera every day for at least 60 seconds. But as we've seen through the past couple videos, it's been quite longer than that. So without further ado, let's get started. Firstly, I wanted to say, well, before even that, got a huge bug bite. Please excuse that. Of chilling by the creek, and I don't know if it was because it just rained or something, but there was too many mosquitoes, and eventually one of them I was allergic to, maybe, not sure, but it's healing. It's getting smaller, and I'm glad because it looks a little bit embarrassing, but you know, that's what you do. You just push through embarrassment, any kind of thing, anything like that. Anything that you're proud of. Which brings me on to another thing. Doing things not because they're, say, beneficial, or that you think logically that they'd be beneficial towards you, because logic is something that is never fully, it's not fully complete. The reason why that is because logic by itself is based on factual information, which is always incomplete. Well, it's not that it's always incomplete, but we would never know for sure that it would be incomplete or complete. Very typically, we have scientific models that exist that, you know, they're very often disproven. But logic is the same way. Logic is the same way that we don't have fully, you know, there's no like universal fact check. There's no like, God doesn't give us whether we believe in him or not, he doesn't give us a universal fact checker for every single theory or hypothesis that we have, or a scientific model. Same is true with logic. We can't only solely rely on logic, which is why we need another way of, you know, deciding things. We need another way to choose to do stuff. A lot of the times, especially nowadays, we use our perceived pleasure. What does that mean? That means we think of, say, oh, I'm gonna scroll social media, but as we could tell, very often after scrolling for hours and hours, and I know this because I've been there so many times, and I know you have. I mean, you're on YouTube. If you have access to a phone, I guarantee, especially if you're in the Western world, you've definitely spent too much time on your screen, more than you'd like to. But what we use for that kind of decision making is like or feel, you know, the first part of the wants, needs, and like. I like to distinguish between those three. I know there's wants and needs. There's a bug. Oh my god. There's a I like to distinguish between those three because it makes it really, really easy for me, at least. You know, I reflect on decision making that I've made in the past, and all of the good decision making that I've done has not come from doing what I feel like. In Christianity, or more specifically biblically, they call this the flesh. They call this living by the flesh. And you know, even outside of Christianity, it's a very common thing to separate that want from what you actually want as a person. Before we get on to wants, well, we're moving on from likes / feels. Moving on to the next one. But before we get on to wants, I want to talk about needs. Needs, I don't really need to explain this to you, but it's stuff like food, water, shelter, the big five. Oh, sleep, of course. I believe that's the next one. And you know, I don't need to tell you that you need all those. There's a freaking bug. So much bugs in this forest. But regardless, I don't need to tell you what needs are. So we have two of those. The needs. What about want? What we as a person want. It's very easy to, well, it's very hard actually. It's very hard to, you know, ask yourself or answer a question like, well, who even is ourselves? Who are we? How do we know that we as a person actually want something? And how do we separate that from our, you know, what we feel like doing, the flesh, the like, or whatever else you want to describe it as? How do we separate that? I use this formula, this thought process in my head, which kind of goes like this. Well, not kind of, this is how it goes. It goes like, will I be proud of doing this? Looking back for my future self, would I be guilty of doing this? We have a terrible way of reading or decision making. Sorry, I don't know why I said reading. We have a terrible way of decision making when it comes to perceived pleasure or abiding by the flesh or with feels. But we're actually very excellent. Very, very excellent at thinking of, will I regret this later on? Will I be proud of this later on? Whatever you want to call that part of you that does actually regret or does actually experience pride on those decisions that you've made, whatever you want to call it, the spirit, you know, your spirit, you as a person, your spirit, maybe you as a person in general, you as, you know, maybe it's just your brain or something, or your mind, whatever you want to call it. Abide by that part of yourself. Abide by that part.